This is Suchitra Vijayan, and you're joining us for our weekly dispatches, Conversations in a Lockdown. With communities around the world currently living under various degrees of quarantine, lockdown, and curfew, these conversations are a way to center and amplify diverse voices and concerns and struggles. We are living through a uniquely historical moment, and that requires solidarity, empathy, and more importantly, ways to affirm our shared humanity. In the coming weeks and months will be chaotic, along with unprecedented expansion of executive power that will encroach civil liberties and further expand surveillance architecture and entrench the already existing inequalities. The borders will be sealed, and communities already struggling under state violence will live through conflicts that will become invisible and erased from our news cycles. Joining us today is writer, scholar, activist Cynthia Stephen to talk to us about the crisis that's happening and unfolding in India today. Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Cynthia, we've all been sitting here shocked seeing the news coming out of India. Before that, can you lay out to us what happened soon after the lockdown was announced and what happened in the immediate aftermath, especially to laborers and various working communities across the country?
See, this is a classic situation in India because, as we know, it's a highly fragmented society. So we have, on the one hand, celebrities, putting out pictures of their workouts, of their cooking, of them doing household work. On the other hand, we have stark images of children carrying heavy loads, pregnant women actually giving birth on the roadside. The worst things that could possibly have happened. This is something like a partition within India. The partition is between the India and the Bharat that has been talked about. But I think this is right here. It has never unspooled itself in the way it has, and I think the middle classes haven't engaged in this live fashion before the privileged classes. So what happened after the lockdown was that, as you know, we had only 4 hours notice. It happened in the, with almost, I mean, it was just like by fiat. And immediately people started, there was a kind of panic. Everyone was rushing to leave or change their situations. Nobody understood that a lockdown means you're not supposed to move. It's like a curfew, much worse. And so a lot of lack of communication, I think, was the major issue. I think nobody really understood what the implications were. We sort of bumbled along and learned as we went along, whether it was the police, whether it was the administration, whether it was transport, food supply. Everywhere everybody was learning as they went along, so it was really hard.
Can you start with telling us when you kept saying that people did not have the right information? What do you think was the problem? Why was this information not communicated to the various sections of the society? Where do you think the failures and the problems started?
I think it's the black spot in the decision makers' uh, thought process. Because I don't when the first announcement was made, for the 22nd Janta curfew day, the announcement was made: come to your balconies and bring your plates and spoons and they generally make a noise. How many people have balconies? How many people have homes? See, the idea is, this is what I was saying. This is the black spot. The black spot is that Bharat actually doesn't figure in the decision makers' mindset, attitude. Basically, for them, India is what they're talking about. The prime minister and his set, they talk about Lutyens Delhi, and basically as if it's an elitist crowd which is out of touch. But frankly, I haven't seen a government as clueless and as out of touch in all my 50, 60 years of experience in this country. Totally out of touch government. That's all I can say.
And can you I know that you've been working in communities around you. Can you map out in specifically in relationship to where you live, what's happening around you, what's happening, how communities are coming together to perhaps help? And I'm also thinking that communities themselves don't have the capacity of the state to do so many of the service deliveries.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. In Bangalore, I'm one thing I'm very proud about in Bangalore is that we have a very large, very vibrant, a very active, and energetic civil society, and it keeps growing. And I think just before this happened, the NPR and CAA protests were happening. So people are already very much exercised and worried about what is going on in the country, and already had become aware that there was some kind of polarization taking place in the society. So there was this capacity, this effort by everybody, all concerned citizens, to try and bridge these gaps. So when the lockdown happened, immediately when the impact started being felt by the poor, the working class, the small entrepreneurs, the vendors who, make their living on the street, whether they're men selling socks and, hair bands on the street, or whether it's women selling vegetables, people selling tea on cycles. These people who make the city what it is, who are the ones who meet, who not just the last mile, but the last meter. They meet, the consumers, the citizens, the people who are making a living, the working class. They all meet on the streets. That the great leveler. So when that happened, when people could not move out onto the street, when food could not be bought, when water supply was affected, water supply was also affected, because in Bangalore we don't have much running water. Our drinking water is supplied in kiosks and booths. You have to go and put in five rupees and collect water in in large bottles. You couldn't do that anymore because your street was tied down. It was not funny. I actually tweeted. I made a tweet asking the CM, how will I manage, because I live 1 kilometer from my water booth, and if you say no bikes, the boy who brings my water, drives it on a scooter, and what will I do? I'm not exaggerating. I got 15,000, views for that tweet. More than that, 18,000 views for that tweet. That's how difficult it was. From water to bread, it's just mayhem, havoc. People were, on the one hand, we couldn't buy vegetables in the beginning, and on the other hand, the vegetables were rotting on the streets in the villages. It was just, then people got active. RWAs, apartment associations got in touch with farmer groups and then got permission, because food was permitted to be transported. So it's also summer where we get a tremendous amount of fruit in Bangalore and flowers. So that was then, fruits particularly and vegetables were permitted to be trucked into Bangalore and, distributed in localities. So actually, we learned, as I said, as we went along. And I think the government was very much slower than, people on the ground in responding to the needs of people. And then the big effort was with feeding the migrants. Literally tons of food grains used to be packed, there's a big college, St. Joseph's College. They opened their places. Then there was another group called Hasiru Dala, which I don't know how many tons, hundreds of tons of food grains were packed and sent every single day. They were packing 70 tons of food grains, I was told. My son worked there as a volunteer. And he said, Mummy, today we packed 71 tons of food grains. So that's how they were working. And this went on for at least 5 to 6 weeks. Before that, then after that, the floods of migrants leaving started. And then we've got people, messing around with luggage on this. It's been absolute mayhem. The government tried to put in place, but the government is only giving rice. How can people survive on only rice? Only rice. They're just giving rice. Not even, dal in their, public. And we know that they're procuring all these things. Why can't they just make the food? If it's not done during a pandemic where millions are just hungry, I don't know when a government, for what they're stockpiling that food grain. You won't believe, they actually said if there is excess rice in the food grain, we're going to divert that to make alcohol for hand sanitizers. Can you believe this? Can you believe this?
At this point in time, I think I will believe anything because, the kind of things that have been put forward. But one of the
Can
other things that I really wanted to talk about is also the violence. The police violence that's been directed against the working communities, especially laborers from out of state who are leaving the states to go back to their hometowns. Can you lay that out for us in terms of what's been happening on the ground?
actually, if you recall, if you know one thing, the the police forces are also part of the working classes in our country.
Hmm.
It's true, isn't it? They're drawn from that social strata. And my husband actually saw this happening. He actually saw this. I think it's worth retelling. He said he saw these migrant workers trying to leave, and they actually, these are Kannadiga people were saying in Kannada, scolding them in Kannada and saying, "You are the fellows who brought these fellows into power. You deserve this. Here, take it." And they're actually backing people up, saying, why did you vote this government into power? It was like, because they also felt the pain. However, it's true that the government was also clueless. The police didn't know what they were, whether they were coming or going in some fashion. All they knew is they had no people should move. So if people moved, you had it really badly. They were beating people up, and people couldn't understand why they were being criminalized for driving down the road. I think it took a while for everyone to suddenly, for it to dawn on people that this was dangerous. Lives were at risk, and everyone had to cooperate. So while that learning curve was happening, there was a lot of violence. I think after that, people themselves began to close off their, and that's another story by itself. Localities closing down their roads and not allowing others to come in and treating people like, in a very offhand manner. All that was also happening. So all of us had to learn, unlearn, relearn a lot of things that we had never had to deal with in the past.
And that
So
brings us to a larger health policy in the country, something that you wanted to discuss specifically. Um, Talk to us about what's been the medical response, how our medical systems are set up in India, and also the serious problems of privatization of health, which is now causing even more problems.
yes, you see, as you know, the health policy has had all kinds of flip flops in the recent past, and fortunately, we have very strong and active civil society even in the health sector, and lots of very good policy analysts are there. We have very good research institutions doing original research and on community health as well. And health and nutrition is something that almost every part of civil society engages with. So everybody more or less knows the issues, and we've been, at least in Karnataka, we've been opposing the government's push towards insurance tooth and nail, because we say that insurance is, we would have been like in the situation as in America, for instance. It was like people would just have been falling like flies. Fortunately, in Karnataka, at least in Bangalore, I think our health system is not as rickety as it is in other places. For instance, I know in places like Gujarat, over the years, the privatization has proceeded rapidly. The public health system is almost moribund, and that you are seeing the results. Ultimately, when push comes to shove, it is the government's infrastructure, and I must say, their grassroots staff, the nurses, ASHA workers, the sanitation people. These are the people who are really keeping us alive. I tell you, the doctors, nurses, and not so much the doctors as the nurses and the sanitation workers and the ASHA workers. The ASHA workers, there was one instance where the ASHA workers were attacked very badly because of, as I said, lack of communication. People were afraid of being quarantined because they thought quarantine was like a prison sentence. Mm-hmm. Because the facilities, as you know, are not very good in government-run institutions. So it took some time for people. Then after that, they started hiring marriage halls and getting food supplied from civil society. So things before the system, see, this is what was the reason, was the core of the problem. If people who had made the decision and understood that the system needs to have a little leeway to make these physical arrangements, that is, make beds available, make food arrangements, and arrange for transport of these people. There was no PPE, for instance. Now suddenly we have become the world's topmost producers of PPE. This could have done, given them 2 weeks now to do it. You see, so this is the kind of I don't know what to say, jugaad that has characterized the government's response in one sense at the center. But I would say the states have done slightly better than the central government in this matter.
And that brings us to two audience questions related to the last comment. Cynthia, do you believe that there is an inherent difference between how different state governments are tackling it? Do you see this across political parties? So the question is asking if you see a marked difference between, say, BJP-run states or non-BJP those states. That's the first question. The second question asks you, do you think the journalistic reporting coming out of India is a true reflection of what's happening on the ground? So if you could take these two audience questions for us.
Certainly, and two very crucial questions. Definitely, there has been a qualitative difference in the way a state is run, and if you compare it with the political party which is running it. If you'll notice, the response in the South has been very much better. Just look at the statistics; they're out there in public. The states in the South, particularly, of course, Kerala, which is, I would just say one thing about Kerala is that it's totally unlike the rest of India because of the way its history, its physical location, and its demographics. They're completely different from the rest of India. That is why the figures also are very different in certain ways. And so so they have a lot of social infrastructure. They have a more educated population, and so the population understood the implications of what was happening, and that's why they got very good results. The government also is extremely proactive, and more than anything, they have a very strong grassroots level governance system, very strong grassroots level governance system. The decentralization of power has happened there than anywhere else in the country. And that is how the micromanagement of this pandemic was so effective in Kerala. And they had also got the experience of working with Nipah a few months ago, or just about less than a couple of years ago, we had Nipah virus outbreak, which was also quickly controlled. So I think that is one thing that has to be noted: the experience, how they use their previous experience. That's the same is true in Karnataka. It's not so bad at all, actually. In Karnataka, we've done reasonably well. Tamil Nadu, of course, was doing quite well till, of course, Chennai now has become a terrific hotspot. But yes, I think definitely. For instance, MP is not doing too good at all. They're having land. Indore was a really bad hotspot. Gujarat is having a terrible time. Believe me, I have friends from there calling me and telling me that you don't understand how bad it is over here. What news is coming out? That will answer the second question. The news that is coming out in the media is not what is the reality. The reality here is that it's really stark. And UP, though, I don't think I should say anything. There has been a total dismantling, if you like, of the public health system there. Systematically, it has been dismantled. It's been epic, the kind of deaths of vulnerable populations like newborns in UP's government-run hospitals. So I think there is a lack of commitment to public health institutions in UP, for instance. All these three states are major cowbell states, that is BJP-run states, and have been under the BJP for a sizable length of time. MP, Gujarat, and UP. Just compare their figures with the rest of India, and you'll have your answer. And then lastly, this morning I didn't have the time to read it in detail, but people can refer to it. Somebody did a study of what is happening in the cemeteries and graveyards in Delhi, and just this morning's news, and it said that the number of deaths seems to be 4 times higher than what has been reported. It's there out there in news. Somebody please Google it. I've been running all day, so I didn't have a chance to even read it. But that's how it is. So media is media management or media, the information sharing becomes a very very crucial aspect of how you deal with and I want to just contrast this with the way, for instance, New Zealand's premier handled the situation there. And they've more or less licked the virus. They've had no infections anymore. They've cleared it up. Of course, they're an island nation, no doubt, and they're not so thickly populated. But the government response also is very strategic and communicated things very clearly, and they gave time for the system to respond. That was all these things did not happen in our case. On the one hand, and the other hand, there was even I don't remember which of it. And there's the other thing where women run countries where the women are in charge. The response has been very much more empathetic. This has been very clearly brought out. So there's Finland, there's Iceland, Germany. In fact, if I'm not wrong, it was Germany. I mean, not Germany. Who was it? One of the European states, Norway, I believe. She was also holding press conferences for children and talking to them. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? In the middle of a pandemic, the head of the state, the government, talking to children. That's how they are taking their role. That's how they respect their citizens. And so, would a man have done it? I think there's also
you would write books, also... no? You would write books about how to do exams really well.
and yes, right. So I think the quality of governance, the difference in the quality of governance, the softer skills that are needed in a pandemic. You need a lot of technical knowledge to handle a medical situation. You need a lot of empathy to be able to handle a very very difficult human problem, that the massive human problems that will result. And you need a lot of resources, and all these three were very much more made available in women-headed countries.
And so I want to say the capacity to listen, the capacity to not listen to your own voice, but the voice of others.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only listen, but respond in a systematic. I mean, there's no blind spot in there. I mean, if a child's voice becomes important to the prime minister of a country, imagine the entire gamut of sensitivities that come into play. And so, therefore, this kind of thing where this massive human these numbers, literally hundreds of millions of people are on the road because the government doesn't seem to respond to they don't exist almost in some ways to the government. How non-empathetic is that?
So that brings us to a bunch of other audience questions that we have. Before the audience question, I actually wanted to put a question to you. Earlier today, the Supreme Court of India said that it's the state's duty to decide what to do with the migrants on the road. And the court, I'm quoting the Supreme Court of India, says, impossible for the courts to monitor who is walking. And for me, this was a very ironic, not only ironic, but a very sad moment, because the courts can monitor the NRC process. The courts can decide if Ram is a historical figure or not. The courts can monitor so many other things. But at this very crucial point,
the courts can also insist on one activist being arrested, denied bail and arrested, and put into jail. One single guy, two single guys being put into on them. But yes, but they're too detached from reality to be able to take this on board.
But Cynthia, there's also another point that I kind of wanted to bring, something that you wanted to discuss. The Supreme Court also earlier, when the migrant crisis was actually beginning, I also don't like calling it migrant crisis because I feel it doesn't, these are citizens of India who just happen to work in other parts. So to again call them migrants or migrant laborers also kind of puts me in a very uncomfortable position. The courts also said that once these laborers were held in these shelters, the court said, oh, they already get food. Why should we give them money? Right?
I, yeah, you know what I said? I said, sir, I tweeted, a response to that. I said, sir, they need money for medicines.
Mm-hmm.
They need money for sanitary pads. They need money for their children's biscuits and milk. Is the government feeding the children milk and biscuits? I want to know.
And that
So
also
what is
brings
this?
the class
How
divide, right? The class, the caste, the social hierarchy of the country. How,
gender, boss, gender,
yes,
the
gender.
gender. And this morning I discovered this is a 2-year-old piece of news, but in UP, 312 judges had been hired, all of them Brahmins. So there is a just compare that, and then after that compare with the delivery of justice. So there is a class, caste, gender bias in the courts, and it's becoming worse. How are we going to get responsive governance if the institutions of the government become further and further detached from the lived realities of the mass of this country, or any country for that matter? That's my concern. It's a serious concern.
We are continuing to take questions for the next 15 minutes, so please send us your questions on the live feed, and then we will keep having this conversation. Cynthia, the other thing that I really wanted to talk to you about is the people's confidence in the government. I see two things. One, on one hand, you see the communities, the working communities, being absolutely annihilated. On the other hand, as you rightly said, you see India's upper caste, upper classes cooking. I don't know if they're also baking bread. You see
Oh
politicians,
yeah,
they're also making bread. Okay.
yeah, sardo. Learning how to make sardo feeder. Yes.
Okay. Sourdough bread. But I also see them sitting and watching the Ramayana as if it feels like India's upper castes and upper classes have seceded from the nation state. I was wondering if you could talk to us about this divide in terms of what's happening, how you're seeing it.
I'd like to slightly modify what you just said about the privileged classes seceding from the nation state. They're not. What has happened is that they're sitting right there in power, in the corridors of power, in the corridors of business, the corporate world. They have forgotten that there's a vast underclass, on which they're sitting.
Mm-hmm.
So when this underclass start up, showing their upheaval, then they will know. See, in Karnataka, I just want to bring the issue of Karnataka here. On the one hand, the government's response was halfway good and halfway not so good. So the government also did a lot of flip-flop. First, they said we are sending them by train. So then the trains were all organized. Then there was a delegation that went to the chief minister and pointed out how much of a damage it would cause to the real estate business in the construction industry in Bangalore, and they're going to collapse if they don't have all their labor there. And so immediately, promptly, that the next day the decision was reversed and all the trains were cancelled. We all, of course, got into action mode and screamed and shouted in 24 hours. They said, no, we'll let them go. This reminded me, I don't know, it reminded me really of the diaspora, that the original diaspora of the Israelites from the country of Egypt, when people, Moses kept going and saying, let my people go to Pharaoh, and they wouldn't, and Pharaoh kept saying yes and then saying no. It's like this. And then again, it just gets going up and down and from bad to worse. They say we'll let them go. But then after they said that, the interesting part was we had their destination states for reverse, migration. Jharkhand was saying don't send them. Odisha is saying don't send them. West Bengal didn't schedule any trains to Karnataka. They've scheduled over 100 trains to other states to take their people, to paired trains, but there were no trains in that list, which I saw yesterday morning, for to take people from and to Karnataka, between West Bengal and Karnataka. What is the reason? There are so many people, and I'm getting construction workers who somehow got my number. Didi, हमारे लिए train कब मिलेगा? कब चलाएंगे train? What can I say? How is that? One cancer survivor, Didi, madam, somebody gave me a number. Can you please help me? I have no food. I've run out of gas. But you know what? I was able to, on the phone, I was able to talk to people. Somebody rushed with food in 3 hours time. Within 3 hours time, meal plus rations was made available. When we found that she can't cook the rations because she's run out of gas, somebody actually bought her a cylinder of gas. So I feel that, the heart and the responsiveness of civil society was so much better, so much more there than ever the government would have been able to handle. So I think we were, I don't know, the common citizen, that Aam Aadmi that we talk about and the Aam Aurat, we were the ones who really, showed we are the patriots. We are the ones who love our nation. Let me tell you this.
What is this, Cynthia? Like, you're the urban Maxwell. How can we all take the things of being like true patriots? BJP has complete, like copyright of who's a patriot and who's a nationalist.
Patriot. People are, roti ke bina, they're walking on the street. My friends are packing their cars with biscuits and bananas and driving down the highway to meet people as they walk, to give them food as they walk. 30 kilometers. They're driving 30 kilometers into the highway to give them food because our people are walking.
So, they're refusing. Who are the people that we, for those who are watching it, we are getting a lot of messages from people. I'm getting direct messages from people saying, who are the organizations and people that others who are really concerned can donate to, or how can individuals work given the COVID lockdown? So what do you suggest that people can do? I know that resources are important, but first tell us who are the people or organizations to whom people can donate, or individuals to whom we can donate, and third, how else can people help apart from just giving money?
Yes, I think this is a very, very important question. Like even essentials like masks were nowhere on the scene. Remember when we started? So when we realized, then the shops were all closed. There was no shop to buy cloth. Then I came up with this idea. I sent one message on my Facebook group, one particular group. I said, if the ladies can please wash their old sheets out and old curtains out, and old tablecloth stuff they no longer use, saris, cotton saris, pack them up, wash them thoroughly, dry them in the sun, pack them and give it to us. We will find people to make masks. We set a lot of people doing that, and I got, donations, 2-3 donations of, saris and sheets, and we had masses of people making cloth masks, and also giving a job to a woman who's needy. So, people generally just jump in. So there's a group called Navu Bharatiyaru in that group came together in the context of of course the CAA, anti-CAA protests. But then after the lockdown happened, you must have heard about the Bilal Bagh in Bangalore. Like the Shaheen Bagh in Delhi, we had a Bilal Bagh. So the Bilal Bagh group, all these people, I'm also part of that. So then they set up this Be the People. You'll see a Twitter handle, Be the People of India.
So can you repeat it one more time so that we will put that Twitter link on the bottom?
We the People of India.
We the People of India. So that's the handle to follow, to send.
It's an India group. The Karnataka one is called Navu Bharatiyaru, which is the same thing in Kannada. So there is a network, an all India network, We the People of India. So these are all citizens' initiatives. There are so many, like Citizens for Justice and Peace, run by Tista. She's also, working on these issues a lot. So though we're not directly involved, but she's always there for such causes. Harsh Mandar's organization is doing a lot on the ground. So a number of such organizations in Bangalore, there are many groups. St. Joseph's College had a large operation where they, in fact, the CM gave them a letter of commendation because the Jesuit institutions set up a huge, really immense operation to do a lot of food. Then when they finished that, they started packing sanitizer kits for people. So there are lots of such. These are some of the ones I can name because I'm personally aware of their work. Yes.
Cynthia, we're coming to the last 7 minutes of the program. So we have one last question, but also a comment that says, thank you so much for your work. And if there is a way for us to help, please. So I'll connect this person to you once the conversation is over. But also, we have one more audience question. How do you see the caste and class divides in India playing out post COVID? Do you see that people will come together to resist more, hold the government responsible? Is that even possible? That's a big question
Well,
to end with. So,
yeah, no. I think it is the question we are all thinking about. You know, I don't know whether it's appropriate to mention it, but there was some speculation a few days ago about the health and welfare of our honorable Home Minister. And there was one irreverent, social media user who was saying that, she's counting the days or she's looking forward to a certain announcement. And so then people then started asking, should we be talking like this? Isn't this very negative? It's very harsh. It's very bad. But all I'd suggest is just go to the comment sections of, say, a newspaper, the online news, article which follows the Times of India. 2 years ago, you could not say one critical thing without a ton of people jumping on you. Now I don't see one positive remark. So the people are beginning to become aware. Now, whether everyone will come together and resist on the streets, that's a different story. But I don't know. I think when the elections come along, we might have some indication of what the people are doing. Except, of course, if there's so much of machinations with EVMs and the convenient judges and election commissioners. So the system, this whole Bharat, this whole divide that has happened between Bharat and those who are sitting in power. The migrants who came, they said they said we will never come back. The migrants who said, "Kuch bhi ho, hum ghar chale jayenge, wapas nahi aayenge." Somewhere there is a message there for the states. I worked on the issue of bonded labor for a long time. At least 5 years to 10 years, I've engaged on that at various levels. I tell you, I want to ask, why is a state like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, West Bengal, Orissa, and the Northeast sending masses of their young people down south for work or east to Punjab? Why? Not east-west. Why are they doing that? Why can't states become more serious about creating infrastructure and employment in their own states when there is so much of need? The citizens of those states really need to think how they can create their own employment opportunities and not, go into these highly liberalized, globalized thing. People come to Bangalore to do certain things. People go to Pune to do certain things, Bombay. No, there has to be, a diversified economic policy. States have to take their own industrialization and infrastructure development and economic development, their farming sector more seriously. And I think there's no getting away from that. States really need to take this seriously. All states.
that brings us to the end of the segment. Thank you so much for joining us today. And then thank you again so much for your analysis and work.
Yeah, I'd like to just say that I myself have a small organization. We've been also doing hands-on relief, food relief, as well as cooked food, as well as dry rations. So like that, there are dozens of little organizations which have actually taken on locally their own needs. And so I think women-led, many of them are led by women actually. You see, again, there is a situation. So we really are all for working together and networking and partnering. We look
Cynthia, is
forward
it
to that.
possible to create a directory of these organizations that we can put out so that anyone who wants to donate their time, resources can then reach out to these organizations individually?
Yes, why not? We can do that.
All right, wonderful.
I'd
Thank
be
you.
happy to answer.
Cynthia, again, thank you so much for your work, your analysis, and always being a wonderful scholar that all of us can rely on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.